All right. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight on the first Fall Author Series of 2025. Thanks for coming out through the rain and the scattered storms. We're super happy to have you here. Just wanted to say, of course, that we do have two more Fall Author Series events coming up. On October 8th, Amanda Jones is going to be at the Olmsted Center at Drake University. She's the author of That Librarian. It's part of a Banned Books Week program. So we're very excited to have her coming. And then on October 17th, Hank Philippi Ryan will be here at the Central Library as well. Very excited to have her as well. But of course, you are here tonight to see David Ellis, and I'm going to introduce the moderator for tonight's event, Dean Strang. Dean Strang is an associate professor at Drake University Law School, where he also directs the Institute for Justice Reform and Innovation. He has spent his career working both as a lawyer and teacher, arguing cases before the United States Supreme Court, and writing widely on criminal law and legal history. Dean's the author of two well-regarded books as well, Keep the Wretches in Order and Worse Than the Devil, and he also has written many articles and essays. He spent 5 years as the first ever federal defender in Wisconsin, and he co-founded the Center for Integrity in Forensic Sciences, and he became widely known for his work that was featured in Netflix's Making a Murderer. We're thrilled to have him here to moderate tonight's event. He's going to introduce Dave, so please welcome Dean Strang to the stage.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks to the Central Public Library here in Des Moines for bringing in the Honorable David Ellis, who I'll introduce in just a moment. We're going to chat on stage. You're probably familiar with that format. I'm hoping you will use the cards on your chair to submit questions. I'd like to devote at least half of our time to that, if you will. And recall, if you aren't already aware, that Dave's got over 20 books, but the two most recent are available here from your friends at Beaverdale Books, and Dave will be signing them on the way out, if you're interested in that. So look closer, second most recent book, The Best Lies. The Honorable David Ellis himself graduated from Northwestern University Law School in 1993. Right after, 3 years straight after completing his undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois. His legal career began as a commercial litigator in Chicago with a large firm, but it also focused on state constitutional issues. Not a lot of lawyers focusing on state constitutional issues. He later served as chief counsel to the Speaker of the Illinois House of Representatives and was the lead prosecutor of Governor Rod Blagojevich in the state Senate impeachment of the governor in 2009. He's published 11, soon to be 13, 12 or 13, of his own crime novels. First one out in 2002. He's co-authored 9 books with the Venerable James Patterson. Many of you will recognize the name, at least. Right out of the box, first book, he won the Edgar Allan Poe Prize for Best First Novel in 2002. And again, his most recent book is The Best Lies, 2024. He has a day job. For the last 11 years, Dave Ellis also has served as a justice on the Illinois Appellate Court. He won retention to a second-year term in 2024. Please welcome him to the podium.
Hi, everybody.
We should probably use these, is that right?
Yeah, probably.
I think they are.
Hello?
Says it, the green light says it's on. Can everybody hear? Okay, all right. Let's start easy.
Yeah.
How does a commercial litigator, commercial trial lawyer, a constitutional law expert, and a legislative lawyer later, how does he decide to become a crime novelist?
I was a writer before I was a lawyer in my head and as a kid, and when I was a little boy, I would read all the mystery books, right? Hardy Boys and what were all those mysteries when I was a kid? The Great Brain books and Encyclopedia Brown, I think, was a mystery guy. And I would write these things for fun. I remember writing a play when I was a kid and making my friends put it on, and it was a little mystery, who stole the pencil or something. And I entered writing contests in like 3rd and 4th grade, and I won, which meant at the time I thought, wow, I won this big contest. It turns out everybody won, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was like, wow, there's a lot of winners in this room. Geez, who lost? Nobody lost, but I was so Dean, I was doing that as a kid, and the teachers made you do that, right? There were writing assignments, creative writing, and then you get older, you get to like middle school, and there weren't a whole lot of creative writing assignments in middle school. And by the time I got to high school, there was 0. Never at any point in time in any of my English classes did anyone ask me to write a story. And by then, like a lot of people, you get focused on what you're focused on. I was trying to get good grades, I was chasing girls, and I played sports a lot. And that's all I cared about, grades, girls, sports. And so I stopped writing, not because I didn't like it, but because nobody was making me do it. Then college, law school, and then a couple years after I was practicing law, I was, we've all had these moments where we're in the rat race, right? We're all frazzled. We go on vacation, you go someplace warm, you watch the sunset, you have a drink in your hand, your toes are in the sand, and you start thinking about your life. And I was like, what happened to that thing you love to do so much, that thing called writing? Why did you stop doing that? And I had no good answer. And so I literally, with a couple cocktails in me, I think it was in like Fort Lauderdale, watching the sunset, I made a deal with myself that I was going to write a book. I had an idea. I'd always had an idea for a book. And I said, you're going to write it. And that doesn't mean you're going to think about writing it. It doesn't mean you're going to write a couple chapters and give up. It means you are going to write the damn book. So I had this busy job in a downtown Chicago law firm, so it meant basically an hour a night for maybe 3 years. And that's a longer answer than you were probably hoping for, Dean, but I like to tell that story because there's a lot of writers in any group that I talk to, or if you're not a writer, maybe your grandchild is, or your child is, or your sister, whatever. And my daughter, for example, my middle daughter is really into writing, and she's running into the same problem. No one's making her do it. So I'm trying to find outlets for her. I'm saying, let's do a short story together, honey. You write a chapter, I'll write a chapter. Whatever it is, the school system is not going to develop creative writing. They'll develop theater and acting, they'll develop music, but they won't develop creative writing. So let's be on the lookout for that with our kids and try to, whatever way we can, foster it, because it's such an important art. And I don't think enough people are. I think there's a lot of great writers out there who we will never hear from.
That's not too long an answer at all. And in fact, I want to go back and pull something out of it.
Yeah.
I think implicitly what you've told us is that certainly not during your undergrad years, and maybe not even while you're on Fort Lauderdale with a second martini watching the sun go down over the Gulf, even at that point, it hasn't occurred to you that someone might make a living as a writer? Is that right? You went right off to law school sort of dutifully.
Yeah.
Everybody knows you can make a living, or can hope to, being a lawyer.
Yeah.
When did it occur to you that maybe one could thrive financially on writing?
Yeah, I never would have taken that kind of a risk coming out of school to say I'm going to throw everything into writing. I was not a risk taker. I was talking to Dean about this before. I was a good boy. Like, I was a rule follower. I followed convention. I was a straight A student. Never, always did my homework when I got home. I was on the homecoming court, varsity athlete, dating a cheerleader. Like, I followed all those little stupid rules. And it never occurred to me to take a chance like that. I think my parents would have come out of their skin if I said, I think I'm just going to be a writer. I'd be like, what? How do you make a living doing that? I was very practical about it. It was one of the things that was so exciting when I decided to do it. And then when the first book won the Edgar, I was like, wow, I could actually do this. And I I like being a lawyer and now being a judge. I love being a judge so much. You know, there's this tension now because I could quit being a lawyer. I would probably make more money if I wrote all the time instead of just part of the time, if you want to put it in dollars. But I don't put it in dollars. I just have two things I love to do, and I'm really blessed.
Let me pick up with that. How does one balance, pretty demanding caseload on an intermediate state court of appeals?
Yeah.
The step above the trial court but below the state Supreme Court.
Yeah.
That's a heavy caseload. How do you
Yeah.
balance that against producing now almost a book a year for more than a quarter century?
Yeah. Yeah, and the court I'm on the Court of Appeals, like Dean said, in Chicago. So I get all the civil and criminal appeals out of Chicago. So I get a lot of the, some really ugly crime, but also a lot of it. Like the volume is very, very high. And it's mostly criminal, but there's a ton of cases. So yeah, it's really hard. And you just have to kind of be disciplined. If I didn't love doing both things, there's no way I could do it. But
What does your day look like?
my alarm goes off at 3:30 a.m. I know, and it will tomorrow morning too. I don't really take days off once in a while. My son's birthday was last weekend, so actually I didn't. I got up at 3:30 that morning too. 3:30 to 7, I write my books. And then the rest of my family's gonna have, my wife, the two of my 3 kids who still live at home, and get them off to school, do all that, and then go be a judge. And maybe there's time in the evening to write. If there is, I'll take it. Right now I'm trying to get a book done, so I'm writing at night, but nighttime is usually for the kids and my wife, it's for the family. So sometimes it's those 3.5 hours a day is all I get. But what's funny is, and you guys probably can relate to this, if you, sometimes you can get as much done in 3 hours as you could get done in 8 hours, right? Like if you have 8 hours, then maybe you check the internet one or more times, right? Maybe take that phone call, but whenever you feel your time tightening, don't you feel your intensity tightening up too, and you get more done? So in a way that's kind of brutal, but in a way it's kind of like, maybe that's a good thing that I just have like 3 hours a day, because I usually can make the most of it.
Any similarities between writing an appellate judicial opinion and writing a novel?
I mean, I sort of, when I talk to lawyers and judges, I teach writing to judges and to lawyers, and I always say to lawyers, good writing is good writing. It's when you put a word like legal in front of writing that you screw it all up. It's just good writing is good. I don't care if you're writing a manual about how to build a model airplane, or a biography of John Adams, or a work of fiction. It's good writing mostly shares the same elements. So, and it was easy for me to become a judge on the appellate court. All we do is in writing, right? Our whole output is a written opinion. That's it. We don't hear trials. We don't make evidentiary. We just write opinions. Having been a writer for so long, that came very easily to me. I write in a very conversational tone as a judge. Older judges than me think it's a very modern way to write. I don't write like most of my colleagues, but I like how I write. And I write conversationally when I write my books too. So I think they complement each other. They're different, but they complement each other more than I expected that they would.
I did a little bit of research on you.
Uh-oh. It's not true. I didn't do it, I swear.
Well, this one might be.
Okay.
You told an interviewer at one point, and I'm quoting you here, at least as the writer quoted you, writing is all about the audience.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to double back on you in a little bit, but I just would like you to expand on that. And I'm curious about that audience. In literary criticism, there's the concept of the ideal reader. Who does the author imagine as their ideal reader, as their audience? I don't know if that plays any part in your conception that writing is all about the audience, but I want you to take and run with that for a bit. I'm not here to work. Writing is about the audience. One of the things I learned from James Patterson, so that is Jim's whole focus, is always
I've made a promise to you, I being Jim Patterson, I've made a promise to you when you buy one of my books. I know what you're expecting, and I'm going to give you that. And he's always worried about the audience. And so there will be times, for example, when we've written books together where I'll turn some pages into him that I've written, and he'll say, well, this is really well written, Dave. And there's a but coming, right? And he's like, but it's a little slow. I think the reader they could tighten the pace up. The reader doesn't need to know that much about the Fourth Amendment or, the mechanics of a helicopter, whatever it may be. He's always worried about the audience's enjoyment, and I think that has really soaked into me too. I'm just constantly thinking, is this enjoyable to read? Is this fun? Is this interesting? Is this boring? And I constantly will go through my manuscript when I'm writing and say, do I need this part? Is this making this more? Is this making the whole chapter more fun for the reader or not? And I didn't used to do that. I used to think more like, well, I've got this plot and I've got to put these elements in. I've got to make this all work. And Patterson would say, that's great, make it work, but make it fun. So the readers get back, this is awesome, this is awesome. And so I always have that in my mind. You guys are, we're in a very serious time in this world, and a lot of depressing stuff going on, and I know that these books are an escape. I'm not curing cancer with these books. I'm trying to give you enjoyment, entertainment, and I think the longer I've been doing this, probably the more I've been working with Patterson too, but the longer I've been doing it, the more I've embraced that. When I first started writing, if you called one of my books a beach read, I would have been like, it's more than a beach read. I'm better than that. And I think, well, what the hell's wrong with a beach read? I like beach reads. You could read these books as a beach read. I think you could read them on a deeper level, but if you don't want to, then don't. Read it as a whodunit. Try to catch the clues and figure out who did what, and everyone's, But at the end, it's about fun. I write the word fun on a Post-it and I stick it up on my computer. And I ask of every chapter, is this chapter fun? In whatever way it's fun, right? It could be scary, it could be romantic, it could be sexy, it could be a big revelation, but something. Every chapter should pack a punch. You should be like, I'm really glad I read that chapter. I can't wait to read the next one. And that really, it sounds elementary. If you break down what I'm saying, you're like, well, yeah, write fun stuff. I get it. But it's actually harder than it sounds. It's not really how most of us writers think when we're writing. But it's how I do now. I credit Jim for kind of screwing my head, a quarter of a degree in a different direction and getting me thinking that way. Because I really think it's helped me as a writer, and I think it's made my books more enjoyable.
So you're describing a writing process that is very focused on your reader, your audience.
Yeah.
But you also told me, not the other interviewer, but you told me that the book starts, it germinates for you with a question of yourself, which is, what character do I want to spend time with?
Yeah.
What character do I want to spend a bunch of time with?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how every one of my wife had to explain this to me after I'd written like 11 books, but I couldn't figure it out for myself. She said, you're at your best when you create a character that you really like, which if I really like it, it means this character is very quirky. They have a lot of weird stuff going on. And so, and when she said that to me, I realized how true that was. And Dean and I were talking about this before. There's that age-old debate, what's more important, plot or character? I'm sure if you guys come to these things and you are in reading groups and maybe you're writers yourselves, you've stumbled upon that question. And there's a bunch of answers to that. And I used to give the kind of safe answer that they're both important, it's 50-50, I actually think character is more important. And I say that even though you would describe my books as very plot-driven. I have very intricate plots in these books. I work very, very hard on the plots. But I still think the character is more important. And that's at least what moves me. Like, I want some messed up, really interesting person. I don't want someone who's perfect. You'll never get somebody who's perfect in my books, who does everything the right way. You won't get someone who bullets bounce off their chest or who never makes a mistake. You're probably going to get a slightly haunted, weird, quirky person. So I start with the character and I say, what do I want the essential attributes of this character to be? Who would I want to spend time with? With The Best Lies, the answer to that question was, I want to spend some time with a compulsive liar. So Leo, the main character, is a compulsive liar. And I said, well, what else? Besides, what would make this even more interesting? He's a compulsive liar and I thought, I think what would be really interesting is somebody who's, I won't say a heart of gold, not quite that, a compulsive liar with a heart of gold, but somebody with an oversized sense of fairness, who really, really can't stand it when he sees an injustice in this world. And he's a lawyer, so he, as a defense attorney, when he sees something happening that's not right, he will stop at nothing. And I mean nothing. I mean whatever he needs to do to right the wrong, usually at great cost to himself personally and great jeopardy to himself. You could sum up the book that way. Leo gets himself into a lot of trouble because he's trying to do good things. Oh, and also he's a compulsive liar, and so that makes him a pretty formidable guy. But I started with that, right? So two essential traits, an oversized sense of fairness, and he's a compulsive liar. And then I thought, why? Why is he a compulsive liar? What made him that way? What gave him this oversized sense of fairness? And I start creating a background, right? And however you can create a character's background, you know, everyone's got different styles. Some people write letters from his perspective. I sometimes will write diary entries from this character I'm creating to try to start to understand who he is, right? But usually as I build his backstory, that becomes part of the plot. With my books, I usually have some messed up characters with really interesting pasts that become the plot. So as I'm creating the character, the plot is starting to come into play too. And that gives me a good foundation to keep going. But I have to start with that character. That's what gets me excited. And if I'm not excited about the book, then I'm not going to write an exciting book. The lack of enthusiasm will come through. You can tell when a writer's not giving it their best, right? Or when they're kind of just going through the motions. We've all read books like that. Sometimes it's a series person and you're like, that one wasn't as good. Maybe he was on a deadline, he kind of phoned it in sort of thing. I would really not want anyone to ever say that about anything I do. All my stuff is kind of different from one another, but I really want you to see the enthusiasm and the emotion and the effort. Maybe not the effort, but I want it to be something special.
If I'm understanding you, you're starting with a quirky, flawed character, a human being, in other words. And now, gradually, the plot is spinning off of that and out of those traits,
Yeah.
warped, though, you know, the traits are in the plot, therefore, will have its...
Yeah,
some of
that's
the warps,
absolutely right.
or wrinkles. And it just strikes me that that's a pretty good hedge against getting bored with your plot or getting bored with telling the story, if that's where you're starting.
Yeah, and that's the key. I mean, I always tell writers, if you're getting bored with your story is boring. So don't be boring, you know? That's something else Patterson would say, don't be boring. You know, don't be dull, spice it up, think of something. So yeah, if you don't find your own story interesting, there is a problem.
So 20 plus books, if you don't mind telling people, who's your favorite character?
So I would probably say the protagonists of my last two books, Simon in Look Closer and probably Leo in The Best Lies. I always wanted to write about a compulsive liar. I just think that's so fascinating that people are like that. And Simon is probably my favorite. Simon is a guy from Look Closer, is a guy who holds a grudge. And I mean he holds a grudge. And I've always been interested in people who can't let things go, probably because I'm a little bit like that. Like I can still go back to grade school and remember people who slighted me. In Chicago, we call that Irish Alzheimer's. You only remember the grudges, right? You only remember the slights. And I am that guy. Like my wife thinks it's so unhealthy. But if somebody says something to me, I won't do anything about it. I won't kill anybody. I've never, well, let's put it this way. I've never been accused of murder before, okay? Never been accused, not convicted, not charged. But so that takes my own little personal trait and Simon takes it to a different level. But the way he deals with things, was really fun. So Simon and Leo are probably my two favorite characters. They're probably competing for number one.
9 or 10 books, something like that, in partnership with James Patterson.
Yep.
Dave, what makes co-authoring something either work or fail?
Well, I can only tell you the way he does it, and he has never. I mean, he's absolutely the boss in the relationship, but he doesn't treat it that way. Like he treats me like I'm his partner on the book. In fact, when he first asked me to write with him, if you can believe it, I actually balked at first. I actually said no to my agent. He asked, and then my agent, funneled the request to me, and I said no. And I think I was just afraid. I think I was just kind of freaked out by the idea of it. But when I talked to him, I said, so my agent said, call him, talk to him, you'll like him, you'll want to work with him. And he was right. When I called him, I said, Jim, I don't know how to write a James Patterson book. That's not how I write. My books are different. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said, I don't want you to write a James Patterson book. I want you to write a James Patterson, David Ellis book. I want you to, I know your style. I like your style. I want you to bring your style and combine it with mine. And I think it could be really cool. And that's basically how he's treated it all along. Like he'll outline a book from chapter 1 to chapter 90, right? And he'll know what he wants each scene to look like. Now, do I follow that outline every time? I do not. But we do it in little bits, maybe 5 chapters at a time. I'll write them and he'll read them and tell me what he thinks. And I will go off script, and he knows that. But he always gives me the rope because he's really good about, he doesn't care whose idea it was. He has no ego about this stuff. Like I can say, I had a different idea. I think we do this instead. And he does not care at all that it was my idea instead of his. He just cares that it's cool. So he'll always say, okay, you seem excited about this. Let's give it a shot. Go. Let's do it. Now, if it doesn't work, if I don't like it, then let's rein it back and go back to the outline, but give it a shot. And there's a couple of books that we did that I completely changed. There's a book called Invisible, where I changed the entire second half of the book. But, I called him, I talked to him, I said, I have a whole different idea for how we could do this. And he was skeptical, but he said, I can see how excited you are. I want this to be a good experience. Try it. And we kept going, and by the end, he's like, I can't believe how much I love this. He trusted me, and we went along, and we talked about it along the way. It was great. So, yeah, he's the boss. He has veto power. But he makes it fun. He's like, if you have an editor at a publishing house, you might or might not get along with that editor, and that editor might or might not have ever written one of their own books. I've written 20 books, and sometimes I'm being edited by someone who's never written one.
But one?
Huh?
Have they read one?
They've read one, yeah. But Patterson is the master. So my editor in those books is him. I'm like, who better to be talking to? Like I've learned so much from the guy. So I'm probably done doing that with him now. I think we just finished up. But I'm forever grateful to him. And I have learned more about writing from that man than anybody.
Okay, my last question before we get to your questions. I started soft. I'm going to end with what might be hard or a little harder.
Okay.
But it's quick. Other than you and James Patterson, for the people in the audience, which is probably almost everyone, who love fiction, who should they be reading right now? Who excites you as an author who's doing really great work out there in fiction right now?
Yeah. Well, I will start with the caveat that my dirty secret is I don't read very many books. I just don't have time. If I'm reading a book, I should probably be writing one of my own, or being a judge, or being a dad. So my free time is usually sapped up in those things. So I really don't read all the stuff that's out there. My favorite writers, I love Megan Abbott. She is amazing. If you've ever met her, I don't even think she's 5 feet tall. She's this very tiny little woman with a really, really strong voice. I mean, she is as good as they come. Her prose, she likes to, you know what she does? She tries to take these, She tries to find a little hothouse, a little community where there's a lot of intensity, and then murder somebody in the middle of it and make it all work. And so one time, that little community was high school cheerleading and all the weirdness of high school, all the parents that are really, One time was the world of science and people trying to find the next great breakthrough in science. The world of dance, she tends to pick those. That's become her thing. She used to write historical fiction, but now she does that. And that's a way to write. And Ruth Ware, that's what Ruth Ware does, right? She tries to find a little place, a bunch of people on a boat where there's no cell phones, or a hen party, like a bachelorette party in England, right? Where they're all just in that house and someone in that house is a murderer, I like those books, and good writers can make that stuff really fun. So Megan Abbott, Ruth Ware is easy. Tana French, Irish writer. She writes it's Irish, but that really doesn't have any impact. It feels like America. She's an amazing writer. Alex Finley, Hannah Morrissey is a little treasure who I met when she was first breaking in. She sets books in a Milwaukee. She calls it Black Harbor. It's like it's right on the lake near Milwaukee. It's a fictional town. It's really dark. She writes really dark, but she's so literary. Like she's a friend of mine. Full disclosure. But Hannah Morrissey is an amazing writer. Is that enough? Because I could keep going, but
that's great.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you.
Audience questions?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
As a published writer, who do you consider your most important relationship? And the questioner has defined the field. Your agent, your editor, alpha readers, or someone else? Who's most important relationship?
God, I am such a loner in that experience. I don't have alpha readers. Nobody reads my book until I turn it in. I know that's not good, but I mentioned Hannah Morrissey, like in The Best Lies, I showed a couple chapters to Hannah. I never do that. But she's like, come on, show me, because I was struggling with something. She's like, send it to me. She just gave me incredible advice that changed the beginning of the book, and it was great. So I should do it more, because it really helps. But I just, I feel like I'm always at such a frenetic pace, I don't have that luxury of showing it to people. Between my agent and my editor, my agent gives me great advice, but she's always got my back. The editor relationship is complex, because, she'll want me to change things. Sometimes I won't want to make those changes. She also has a lot of say in my success and how the rest of the publishing, the publisher, the rest of the company sees me is how they see me through her. And so I want her to really like what I'm doing. She's kind of my client, right? Like you think, oh, she just edits you. It's so much more than that. And so, and I'm doing this right now because I'm doing rewrites on my next book. And there's something she wanted me to do. And I wrote her this really long email explaining why I would not do it. I'm like, if you make me do that, this is how the different ways that this book is gonna suffer. And I just really, really don't want to do that. And she said, okay. But I was afraid she might be like, well, I really think you should. And like, well, now what? So that's a complicated thing. Frankly, the person who helps me the most is my wife, and she doesn't even read them. But I'll talk to her about stuff. And she will come in out of the blue and be like, well, that doesn't sound very compelling. Or, oh, that sounds like a really cool thing. Or, why don't you have it be this instead of that? And I'm like, oh, wow. Like she has that ability to just step into the middle of a very abstract story and give me advice. She's that smart.
Great. You ready for a bit of epistemology and philosophy together?
If I knew what that meant, I might be able to answer that.
You do know what it means. The question is, what does the truth mean to you as somebody who both is a judge and a writer of fiction?
Yeah, I've become exceptionally cynical about the concept of truth. And the law is always, of course, aimed at finding the truth, but it doesn't do a particularly good job of it, in my opinion. I hate to say, that's depressing. A trial is about getting to the truth by the adversarial process. You know, one side pushes their version of the truth, the other side pushes theirs, and somewhere in the middle is supposed to be the truth. But there are so many reasons why that doesn't really work out, and that's probably not even the best way to do it. One is that one side might have better people than the other side. And so that shouldn't make a difference in what's the truth, should it? But it does, because, and the other is who's deciding what's the truth? The jury? The jury, you know, and what information do they hear? They hear whatever the judge lets them hear. And there's a lot of stuff that's usually pertinent to the truth that the jury never gets to hear for various reasons that we put into place in the law. You know what I'm talking about very well, Dean. I mean, you've tried a lot of cases. You know, for example, you might say something is too prejudicial. It's you know, like take an example of somebody who's charged with, you know, stealing a car. If you knew that that person stole 5 other cars in the last month, wouldn't that make it in your mind more likely that they stole the car this time? But do you think you're going to be told that in the trial? 99 times out of 100, the judge would say that's not admissible. You're not charged with those, and it's prejudicial. It's almost too relevant. It will play too big a role, and so we're not going to hear it. Now, do we get closer to the truth by keeping that out? I don't think that got closer to the truth. So I'm sorry. I'm cynical.
But so what about in your life of fiction? Is it easier to find truth there, or are you not looking for it? What on us to find?
You know, there are some things that are, you know, if you're writing a book like I'm writing, usually somebody's been murdered, and one of the questions, hopefully not the only question, will be who did it? Like, there's a truth to that question. But a lot of the things, you know, I write complicated characters, some complicated conflicts where you're not sure you're rooting for them or against them. I mean, how many times have people told me when they read Look Closer, I wasn't sure whether to root for or against Simon? And I'm like, cool, because I didn't know either when I was writing them. You know, like, there's no truth there. Like, I don't usually, other than some basic facts like who committed the murder, I don't try to get to the truth. I want you guys to decide what you think is the right result, and you can decide whether you like the outcome or not.
Good. This one's easier, but it could take us interesting places.
Okay.
Have you ever talked to someone who turned out to be a compulsive liar? Leave me out of this.
Other than you, Dean. Yeah, actually, yeah. In high school, I had a friend who it turned out was a serial liar. I don't know if she was a compulsive liar. You know, they've got these definitions: compulsive liar, pathological liar. And frankly, from what I can tell from my limited research, I mean, you know, some medicine you can look at somebody and say, like, you know, that bone is broken, or that's a tumor, you know, and then let's pull it out and see if there's something more to that tumor that we should be worried about. But whether you're a compulsive liar or not is, you know, it's not that cut and dried anyways. So, which, by the way, was very liberating for me, because if there were very essential traits, I was going to have to get everything right in the book. But the truth is that I think I'm not saying it's mumbo jumbo. I'm just saying it's not clearly defined things. I had a friend who serially lied, and I think she still does. I wasn't a close friend with her, but I knew her. She ran in a crowd that I was in, so kind of loosely within a crowd we were acquainted, and we came to find out that she just lied about everything, and it was sad. I mean, I'm friends with her sister now, who turns out is a really good writer, and I'm trying to help her break into the business. But I understand it's better now. But yeah, I thought about her when I was writing the book. But frankly, I felt bad for her. I feel bad for people like that. I felt bad for that about Leo. I mean, I didn't write Leo as someone you're going to feel sad for. I tried to make him entertaining, but there's a sadness to that too.
Our next questioner actually has 3 questions, and
Right.
with an apology, I'm going to narrow it down to 1.
Okay.
And I picked the one that's technical.
Okay.
We haven't done a lot of that.
Okay.
We talk process, but not technical. And the question is, what are the most important elements of your own writing style?
The most important elements. Gosh, you stumped me on that one. What do I do well? I work very hard on dialogue because I think that if you get dialogue wrong, you can really pull somebody out of a scene. It's one of the ways you can really wreck a scene is with stupid dialogue. And there's a lot of stupid dialogue, and there's a lot of stupid dialogue on television. And when someone does it right, it feels different. You're like, yeah, that's how people talk. And whatever you have to do to get that dialogue right, I think I can do that well. I think I have, there are plenty of things I'm not good at. You asked me what I'm good at, so I'm gonna sound like I'm bragging. Plenty of things I don't do well. I don't set atmosphere all that well, I don't think. I said that to somebody else, and they said, yeah, but we spend most of our time inside the heads, so it doesn't really matter what the color of the walls are, because it's what's going on in these weird people's heads. And that's probably true. I'm good at deception. I'm good at tricking you. It's an art. And I assume, you talked about who's the ideal reader. Like, I assume you are an intelligent reader and that you are trying to figure this stuff out. You're trying to guess what's going to happen next. Some people aren't. Some people just say, take me on a ride. I'm on a beach, right? But some people, want to guess. And I'm assuming you're trying to guess. And so I'm factoring in that in trying to make you think something different. Writing and maybe movies are the only places in life where it's fun to be tricked by somebody, right? In real life, that sucks to be tricked, right? But in a book, if I trick you, you're like, oh, that's awesome. Oh, I never saw that coming. In any other part of your life, I never saw that coming. It's not usually a good thing. So that is something I'm able to do. I'm able to put something out there, I think, and let you see it, but I decide how you see it, right? In such a way that you're not really seeing it for what it is. And then it comes in later and you're like, oh, okay, wow. That's pretty hard to do. That is probably one of my strengths.
Good. The next questioner had two, but you've already answered one of them.
Okay.
They based a character on somebody you've met or known. So I want to ask the second one, which is going to have you step out of your author shoes and back into your judicial robe. I'm going to tie that into the next question after that.
Okay.
The question is, what do you think of all the threats that judges are subjected to in the last several years?
I don't, we don't have okay, I'll try not to preach, I'll try to keep this short. We do not have a democracy without the rule of law. We don't have one. That is literally the only thing that makes us a democracy, because we're a big honor system, right? This whole damn country, since its founding, is an honor system. Judges don't have an army, they don't have the power of the purse. They just say what's right and wrong, and those other powerful branches of government are supposed to listen. And if they start saying we're not going to listen, we're not going to have a country. I don't know how else to say it. I used to teach. I'd have talks when my kids were in grade school. Their daddy was a judge, and so the teacher would say, "Hey, could you come in, Judge, and talk to the kids?" And I would give a little civics thing, and I would always tell them the story of the 2000 presidential election, Bush versus Gore, and how that came down to one state, it came down to a few counties, and slightly more than half the people in the country voted for one guy, this guy named Gore. Slightly less voted for Bush, but electoral college. I didn't want to get into the electoral college with like third graders, but I said basically it came down to this. They were going to do a recount. The Supreme Court came in and said, stop the recount. There's not enough time. Even though we know this election is flawed, even though we really don't know who won, we're just going to have to go back to election night. Who was announced on election night? It was George Bush. So George Bush wins. And half the country thought their pocket had been picked. I mean, if ever there was a time for our democracy to crater, it was right then, right? But the losing guy stood up the next day after that and said, the Supreme Court has spoken, that's the rule of law, I concede defeat. And we brought in this guy, George Bush, and he became president. And I always said, that's why we're a great country, because we have those three branches and they all respect each other. And now I don't think the executive branch is respecting the judiciary, I don't think they have outrightly said yet, I don't have to follow you. I hope that never happens, because, I don't know if we have a country if that happens. I don't see how can there be a country without the judicial branch? The threats, there's always been some threats. It's getting a lot worse. It's just, I don't know what to do. We can't have it. But, what has to happen for people to say, okay, we should stop doing that? I don't know. If I had that answer, I'd be running around the country screaming it from the top of my lungs. But I'm really worried about our country. I'm really worried about our country, and I love this country, and I love people on both sides of the aisle, and I remember a time when people could disagree agreeably. I loved that time. I used to love to talk politics with my friends, right? Some of you probably do, some of you may not, but I loved a good policy debate, even if you're raising your voices, but you still love the person you're talking to. I mean, now forget it. You can't do it anymore. It's just, I want to go back, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but I hope people, no matter how much they disagree with a court ruling, will appreciate that it is really the backbone of our democracy, and without it, I don't know, we're something other than a democracy. And I didn't mean to bring you down.
No, and we could, I'm, okay.
Well, thanks. Sorry, I told you I wasn't going to preach, and then I preached.
I'm tempted to keep everybody here till 10:30 following that one. I'm not going to do it. I promised you a related question in spite of my own follow-up. Do you ever get inspiration, stepping back into your author's shoes, do you ever get inspiration from your actual cases, either when you were a lawyer or as a judge?
I do. I don't, I would never copy a case. I would never even copy a thing from my case. I'll put this one out to the audience and see if anyone can guess this. What kind of cases do you think? So I get everything, right? I get the appeals from every civil and criminal case in Cook County, in Chicago, right? So any civil case you can imagine, and certainly any criminal case you can imagine. Does anyone want to guess what category of cases inspires me the most? Don't be shy if you want to guess. I'll give you a hint. They're not criminal cases. Family law, yes. Divorce cases. It is amazing what people will do to each other when their marriage has fallen apart. And it is disturbing, and it probably sounds disturbing that I get inspired by that. So understand what I mean when I say inspired. But I told you, I like to write about conventional people who get pushed to the edge, and you see a lot of that in domestic. And so I see crazy stuff that I can't believe people did to each other. And I have never copied something, but I get inspired by it. It gets me into that frame of thinking. For Look Closer, I talk a fair amount about cell phone technology. I did some very big cases on cell phones, on cell phone technology. But what I mean by that is tracking people by their cell phones. That's what I mean. Which today you all pretty much know you can be tracked by your cell phone, but 10 years ago you didn't, or a lot of people didn't. And I had a big murder case where a guy, murdered his ex-girlfriend, stuck her in a trunk, drove her about 20 miles south of Chicago, drove behind a restaurant, dug a hole and buried her there. And they never would have found her except they tracked his cell phone all the way down there. And then said, wow, you seem to be spending a lot of time behind this restaurant. So they brought the cadaver dogs and found the body, convicted him of the murder, and I got the case. And the police didn't have a warrant when they pulled his cell phone technology. So the question was, his cell phone data, Fourth Amendment, so that was a big question. And as I was doing the case, which was fascinating, I was just reading all about cell phone stuff, and I thought, wow, I could play with this. So I play with it and Look Closer. So stuff like that will happen, but, or little nuggets, I had a case, I'll give you one more and then I'll shut up, but I had a case, kind of a cold case that was brought up, and this guy was claiming there was new evidence, and so he'd been in jail for a long time, and it was a murder. But the actual murder happened in like the 80s, like the late 80s. And when the body was found, stuffed in the back pocket was a coupon that had been cut out of the newspaper. Remember that little thing we used to do? We cut coupons out of newspapers. And depending on what day that coupon was actually in the newspaper, the defendant either had an alibi or he didn't. They didn't know exactly the day of death. The time of death was a big enough window. They didn't know if it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday. But they did know that there was a coupon in the back pocket, and if it only was there on Wednesday, that meant that they were alive on Tuesday and the defendant's innocent. And stuff like that, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I could do something like that, So I file those little things away, and they usually find their ways in books.
You'll connect with this. Early in my career, I worked with a really lovely lawyer, and every year, this is true, every year, he would deliberately schedule the final hearing of a divorce, he did some family law, on his own wedding anniversary to remind himself how lucky he was to have the spouse he had.
Yeah.
And that was a lifetime union. Anyway.
That's great.
The next question is, we'll probably get time for one or two more. What is the thriller fiction community like? I've always heard it's a friendly, welcoming community, the questioner adds.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. It has changed over the years. I'm now like the old man, I was doing that circuit in the early 2000s, and it was a different crew. Frankly, it was just mostly a bunch of white men, and the difference now is great. There's so much more diversity, so many more women in writing, and so many more minorities, and it's really become, I think, a much more supportive group of people. I'm sort of the weird guy because I'm not a full-time writer, and I've got this kind of stodgy job, I think sometimes people are like, well, this guy's a judge, so I gotta be formal around him or something. And it takes a while to realize that you really don't have to be formal around me. Like, that's my time to play when I'm hanging out with writers. But some of them are kind of like, who's this guy? But it has become a much warmer and supportive group. And now I really look around when I go to these conventions, and I feel like everyone's trying to prop everyone up. It's a tough time to be a writer. You hate to mention AI, but of course that's out there, and that's really worrying people about the integrity of writing in the future. And I think we kind of feel like all for one and one for all right now. And I really feel like everyone's pulling for each other. And so it's great. And I love the chance to get together with people.
Okay, last question. This is a good last question, I think. If you've become cynical about the truth, what is it about your job or jobs that brings you joy?
So what brings me joy about being a judge is I think I have made the legal system better. When we write opinions, that becomes the law that the judges below us have to follow. And there are many times where I've identified problems in the law, big or small, but some were big, and I've seen the higher court, the Supreme Court, say he's right, we need to do things differently now. And I really am proud when I do that. I once in a while you get, I had a guy who spent 18 years in prison for a crime I'm almost certain he did not commit, but he was beaten by the police. But that didn't come out because he had a shitty lawyer who would not speak up. And he got shot down by every judge. And it drove me crazy because they were not giving him a fair hearing. And I read the record, which was this high, this thick. And I said, this guy has, they were saying things like, well, it's very late in the day for you to claim you were beaten. And I looked at the record and I thought, he's been saying that since the first chance he got, he's been saying it. But his lawyer didn't say it in court. And, I ended up freeing him, and a lot of the trial judges were mad at me for that. But it was the right thing to do. And I was reading about it later about how he all the prison guards loved him. He was beloved in prison, and they were all hugging him and jumping up and down and screaming when the case came down. And I started crying reading this. You know, like that's kind of stuff. It doesn't happen every day, but that's why I do it, you know, because I'm trying to make the world a better place, and I'm not going to do it in huge ways. Don't have that level of influence. But that's why being a judge is so meaningful, because sometimes, and it's not that infrequent, you really make a difference in the world. Writing, not as dramatic, but I do really believe in the arts, and I really believe in the need to have stimulating entertainment, not just stupid entertainment, if I can say it that way. I really believe in the arts. I really believe in music. I really believe in acting, and I really believe in writing and reading. So for that, I just am glad that I can be a part of it.
Thank you. And as we wrap up, thank all of you, not just for supporting AVID, authors visiting in Des Moines, and the fall author lecture series, but for supporting the Des Moines Public Library system. If I can intrude just a little bit, if we're all unhappy, and I am, like Dave, about a country in which we're screaming at each other much of the time, including screaming with our thumbs on devices behind screen names and anonymity. We've got in this building roughly 1 million tools against that. They're on shelves, and they're filled with thought and nuance and knowledge and care for craft and deep research.
Well
And you're
said.
supporting that.
Well said.
I can't thank you enough for supporting that. Remember, the books are on sale here. He's going to sign it if you let him afterwards. October 8th is the next event here, welcoming in a real librarian and author, Amanda Jones, with her book, That Librarian. Takes place, though, not in this building, but at Olmsted, the Student Center on Drake University's campus, but under the aegis of AVID. Join for that if you possibly can. But for now, would you give a good round of applause and thank you to Dave Ellis.
Thank you.